Hello and welcome to You Are the Magic podcast. My name is Kylie James and I'm your host. And I'm so excited this week to be talking to Mia Shilkin. Mia, how are you today?
Hi, Kylie. Feeling very magic. How are you?
I'm always feeling very magic, so it's great to see you. For our listeners, Mia and I met probably about 12 months ago, I think it must be now, through a mutual friends conference. And it's just been an absolute joy getting to know Mia and what she does and who she is. And so I thought I'd bring her and invite her onto the podcast so we can learn a little bit more.
Oh, that's so lovely of you. And it was so wonderful meeting you. It must be our anniversary soon.
I think it is. I think it's the end of October, actually.
Yeah, I believe
Yeah,
so too. And we just
yeah.
clicked when we first met. We knew we had more to talk about, didn't
Oh,
we?
absolutely, absolutely. And so we're going to do that today, which is fantastic.
Love that.
Do you want to share with the listeners a little bit about you, who you are, and what you do, and then we'll kind of dive into how you found your magic.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. That's such a broad question. Who am I and what do I do? Well, as you've mentioned, I'm Mia, and I'm originally a West Australian, currently residing very happily in Queensland, although I do miss my loved ones over in the good old W of A. And I have for quite some time loved and operated in real estate, working only with investors. And recently, I have decided to branch out with my particular set of skills to support other business owners through the growth and development of their businesses through networking. So that's sort of my professional scope, but really, my calling is being a Pomeranian mum. I'm
Oh,
very proud mum to Benny and Beatrice, who require a lot of time and attention. And they're my why. They're why I do what I do so that I can keep them in the lifestyle to which they're accustomed.
oh, I love that. I too have. I don't have a Pomeranian. I have a Cavoodle, otherwise known as a
You do.
Velcro puppy. And yes, it's they're just the biggest joy in your life. I think when if you don't have kids, they really are.
Absolutely. Fur
Yeah,
mum by choice.
absolutely, absolutely. Me too. So tell us a little bit about, well, like maybe we might have to wheel back sort of a few years prior to 12 months ago. But tell us a little bit
Sure.
about Mia and how, Mia came to be who she is and the woman she is today.
Well, it's funny deep diving into these questions. It gives us sort of time to reflect and also to really look at things that maybe we didn't look at as we were experiencing them. I am the great-granddaughter of immigrants, and they got off a boat in Fremantle not speaking any English to the point where our surname was spelt wrong because that's just what they did at Fremantle Immigration when you got in at the wharf. And I grew up in a bit of a different household, coming from such a rich history of our family. I grew up in a Jewish household as well, so we kind of had this structure to our lives that I think a lot of young people potentially don't have. Just growing up in everyday Australia, there was certain um, not procedures, but and not even rituals, but just practices that we followed. Like every Friday night, we had family dinner, and alcohol was present in our home because we would do the blessings on the Friday night to say thank you, lots of gratitude, all that sort of thing. So alcohol was not like this big bad thing. We'd be given a little sip as we got older when we were growing up. But yeah, it was very interesting growing up. I was the only Jewish child at my primary school. I was the only Jewish child at my high school. That was a bit more of a bigger deal. It was 800 people. Primary school was probably only a couple of hundred, but sort of growing up different in West Australia in the 80s and 90s was, we sort of touched on it earlier today when we were having a quick chat. You spend so much time as a young person wanting to fit in, and there was no way I was ever going to fit in. I was super tall, super fluffy and curly. A different name to everybody, all the Claires and the Annas and the Jessicas. I wasn't the same as everybody else. And, I had this strange family. I remember there was one day there was an exercise that we did at school where we built a barbecue. There was like this exercise we were doing. And my dad actually came along to help build this barbecue. And then it was sort of this, it's a bit weird talking about it. We're the only country that eats the animals on our national emblem, but they were actually making emu steaks and kangaroo steaks. But because they're not allowed in Jewish tradition, I was the only child, even though my dad had come to help build this barbecue, I was the only child out of everybody that couldn't eat. So, and that was okay. I didn't feel bad about it. It was my choice. But I kind of stood out from a very young age as being different. And even through high school, I always wanted to fit in. All the girls had straight hair and a flick fringe, and they were all, like just allowed to do what they wanted when they wanted. Whereas I had these sort of older, more specific, particularly my dad was 40 when I was born. So I had these older parents who were very strict. You could not just go down to the shops and hang out with all the other kids. You had to have a purpose for being there. Well, all my friends with younger, cooler parents were like, yeah, you want to go down and hang out at the shops together? As long as you're not alone, it's all good. Whereas mine were like, well, what are you going to be doing down there? No, if this is not a planned activity, you're not just going to loiter. That's not okay. And so, oh, you're so uncool. You're ruining my life. They didn't ruin my life. Spoiler alert, it's going really well. Thanks, Mum and Dad. In fact, I knew that I was maturing and getting older when I thanked both of them. So after I had moved from Western Australia to Queensland, I had so much time for introspection. I had so much time to look back both on the challenges and the successes of my previous years, and also to sort of look at some of my life habits and life patterns that I'd fallen into and decide which ones served me and which ones didn't. And during that time that I was like, you know what? Having such strict parents with such a not regimented, but there was like a pattern to things, we knew what was happening on what days, and there were rules. And it's okay to have rules and boundaries. And I think that these days, rules and boundaries can be seen as an offense or an insult. You weren't allowed to say no. But I was brought up to have good rules and boundaries. And I lost that along the way. And then I gained it back again when I stopped caring what people thought of me.
And I guess you also chose which ones you wanted rather than just saying, well, mum and dad said this. You got
Yeah.
to test those boundaries, you got to test those rules and figure out, well, what ones work for me and what don't work for me.
Yeah. And it's funny at the time, you think that it's like a major imposition and it's not um, conducive to, your happiness as a child or a teenager or, a young adult. And then later on, you have these like light bulb moments that almost have a soundtrack to them because they're that, you know, poignant in that time where you think, wow, this is what they meant. Okay, so they weren't just broken records repeating themselves about something and we just thought they were uncool. I get it now. Or the best one is when you hear yourself repeating that advice and you go, oh my gosh, I've turned into my parent.
And most of the time they're trying to keep us safe or they're trying to protect
Of
us,
course.
and because
Yeah.
that's what they feel their job is. And then as you get
Yeah.
older, you don't necessarily need that same level of protection or same level of safety. So the rules can be changed. It's just that at the time they feel, no, no, that's the best thing for you in this particular scenario or this particular phase of life.
Yeah. And on the flip side, some of my friends who had no rules went completely off the rails.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I stayed on the rails. There was some rail hopping in my history, but no rules and no boundaries. And then there was also this feeling of, well, my parents didn't care enough about me to put rules in place, whereas mine clearly did, because you're absolutely right. It was all about keeping me safe. And now as a really proud aunt, and I look at my beautiful young people and I think I know exactly why, and I say the same things to them now. Um, But it's about when we care for and we love somebody that we feel might be vulnerable, like a young person, wanting to keep them safe and reminding them to keep themselves safe.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I want to wheel back to a comment that you just made before, just around when I stopped caring about what other people thought, because
Yeah.
that's a really big deal for a lot of people. It's that we actually do things that are, it's not necessarily what we should be doing or could be doing, but it's because we're trying to please other people. And before we jumped on this podcast, that was a topic that we were talking through, was the whole, this whole concept of people pleasing. How has that sort of shown up in your world, and how has that changed over the years, either as you've grown up or as you've moved from being in that real estate sort of industry more into your business now? What sort of changed for you?
Well, it's interesting you say that because moving from standard real estate into only working with property investors and transitioning out of working for somebody else into my own business was kind of like a timeline of caring less. And look, I just want to make a disclaimer there. Terms and conditions apply. I'm not saying that other people's opinions are irrelevant. I'm saying you need to choose which ones. So, first of all, people who've not achieved what we want to achieve are probably not the ones that we'd be taking major life advice from, for a start. Um, Look, there's a lot to do with your gut and intuition. And I think one of the things as a young person um, that I ran into a lot was I'd have friends and I'd hear them and they'd be, oh, this person's done this or that person's done that. And you'd hear this sort of list of woes. And then later on, you'd realize, well, hang on a minute, that's how everybody is around them. So maybe it's them that's the problem, not everybody else. And then when it was my turn, and I too got treated like all these other people, I'd be like, oh, I get it now. So sometimes you're fighting a losing battle. You don't even realize it's a fight, but you've lost it before you've even started because you're never going to win that situation when people are a certain way. So it hasn't come easily, Kylie. It really hasn't. And I think moving to Queensland 5 years ago and being really isolated after a period of time, going through a horrendous relationship and subsequent breakup, and being isolated and alone and not being able to get back to Western Australia, and gave me a lot of time to really focus on myself. And I think I actually got an award from one of the online audiobook companies because I'd spent like 3.5 months literally listening to self-help stuff. So I did this full deep dive about childhood and about, your sense of self-worth. And, there were coaches involved. It's how we met. We met at the conference put on by one of my mentors. And, business coaching, which kind of sort of extends into life coaching to some extent as well, has really helped. But I think, there are some people you're never going to make happy. There are some people who, in their own life, they don't have good boundaries, and that sort of bleeds into their interactions with us as well. So it is about keeping our eyes open and looking at the full picture. And if somebody has an absolute circus going on in their own life, sometimes we have to think why that is, and are they potentially the ringleader? And is that the kind of person who we want then decreeing, their opinion of us as gospel? It's got to be that something that, and I'm not saying that we don't take on board other people's feedback either as well. That's not what it is at all. But at the end of the day, sometimes as long as we're being ethical and we know we're doing what's right, that's what we've got to focus on. And if we've upset somebody through some turn of phrase or just, by being big and bold, that's a them problem.
And for me, it's about, are you living in alignment with your values? Because your values aren't necessarily going to be the same as somebody else's, and that's okay. It doesn't make you right and them wrong, or vice versa. But it's this question of, are are they the right people for you to be hanging out with at the moment? And it doesn't mean that it's a forever thing. It could mean just right now it's a no, down the track it could be a yes. You don't know. So it's sort of just constantly, as you say, surveilling and just making sure, checking in on where you're at, and is this the right thing for you to do? Or is that the right decision to
Oh,
make, or whatever it might be?
completely. And I was talking to my nephew about this yesterday, actually, because um, yeah, there was some workplace stuff going on for him. And I said to him, I just want you to, because I'm not biased, but the most incredible human being. And I said, we have this little thing called tall poppy syndrome. And sometimes, you know, people who are not self-aware, they're not able to look inside themselves and do that work. They just look externally, and they're the sort of things that they, start to try and play with or change or take control of. And there was a job that I did when I left real estate sales. Sorry, there was a job that I did when I left counseling and human resources and youth work. And then before I got into real estate, and there were these girls there that were horrendous. They made my life absolute hell. One in particular, she was horrible. And then she sort of had her friend who was, following her lead and everything. And yeah, the one in particular was, what did they say? Hurt people hurt people. And there must have just been something about me that just triggered her. I don't know what it was. But many years later, the other one sent me a message on Facebook apologizing for the treatment of me. And we're friends now. We've been friends ever since. I was like, oh my gosh, thank you for recognizing that. But hey, I got through it. It was challenging. It's taught me so much as well. And in fact, her kids call me Auntie Mia. So, it's a real genuine friendship, but it just shows that not everybody involved in those situations is bad. Sometimes they're pressured. Sometimes, there are other factors at work. We were all quite young then. And people who have some self-awareness can look back on those experiences. And to her credit, this friend of mine didn't feel comfortable with how things had been and reached out to me and apologized. And the fact that I'd already forgiven her, but that was major.
Yeah.
So huge credit to her. And that was, 15, 17, whatever it was years ago. And we had back, but yeah, so it's you just can't take these things to heart. You just don't know where they're coming from.
No, and sometimes it's that we just want to fit in. We don't want to be the different person.
Yeah.
So we'll just go along, but we don't realize by just going along, it's a compromising our own values or compromising who we are as a person. And it doesn't matter whether it's in to another friend or to
Mm.
another workplace. It's we don't know, and sometimes it can just happen. And I think when we do stop and pause and say, is this the space that I want to be in? No. Okay, what do I need to do to change that? And do I need to go back and have a chat with somebody and say, hey, this wasn't right what I did, or I want to apologize for that, or this is how I saw it. Can we chat about it, or whatever it is? I actually think that takes a lot of courage to do that.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just a Facebook message I received, it was also an invitation to meet for lunch.
Yeah.
And so there was a huge amount of courage and bravery there. Um, and it's about showing insight and maturity as we age. And I think, that's one of the blessings of wisdom and evolution in our lives is if we're open, we keep learning and we're always open to improvement. And yeah, but you're right, you do have to choose who you spend your time with. There's a saying that you are the sum of the five people you spend the most time with, and also if you're the most intelligent person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like to keep that in mind. It's okay though, because it's not very often that I am the most intelligent person in the room, so I'm doing okay.
Oh, look, I love both of those sayings as well, and
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think for me, taking steps to continue to be the best person that you can be and surround yourself with the best person people. I think it just makes your world just so much. lighter and easier and happy. And I don't know, like it allows you to look at challenges in a different way. And it was really interesting. I met with my uncle last week and he said, Kylie, there's no problems in the world. There's some challenges. And he said sometimes you just got to put the challenges in a box, and you don't need to overthink and you know constantly
Yeah.
just focus on those challenges. But one day you'll have a look at those challenges and you'll say, "Yep, I know how to deal with that now." And you take it out of the box and away you go. It was a really interesting conversation, and he was talking about it in a business context. But I think you can apply that to life as well, is that you don't have to solely focus on every challenge that comes your way. However, if it's there, you know it, but you just, one day a solution will come forward for you and show itself.
And that's so interesting. That's a great convo with your uncle. And that shows like quite a level of awareness on his part as well, because there are people out there, and you will have come across them too, that they're actually more focused on the challenge, and that's where their end of the road stops. Oh, there's a challenge. It's not a speed bump. It's a stop sign, And I think that when we're in business, we can learn that there is more than one way to, there's a detour, or there's a roundabout, or there's a different way of doing things. And sometimes when we can't work these things out on our own, which is why it's really great to have these events like you and I met at. And I know we both do coaching, like we're both clients of coaches to help us with this. And it's because business can be quite lonely, and you can really get stuck on some of these challenges. So having somebody there to just shine a bit of a light and say, you know what, that's okay. It's okay to feel that. It's okay to acknowledge the fact that that's a bit sticky. But look, have you thought about it doing X, Y, or Z? And also we're emotional creatures, people in business, because our businesses are our babies. So we're completely emotionally invested in it. And sometimes we need to take a step back and go, right, let's think logically about this. It's why, relationship counseling is necessary when there's things to navigate, because we're emotionally involved and we can't be unbiased and look at the situation from our outside. And look, I've talked about property and investing and the correlation between online. I think that there's like a lot of similarities between the two. And I also think that, business is like that as well. You find the right team or the right people to guide you and support you. And then you've got a lot more knowledge and resources uh, at your disposal, rather than just trying to do it all alone.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think, what you're really saying is it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to reach out for
Absolutely.
guidance, whether it be in whatever part of your life, because we we don't always know the answer, and that's okay. We don't have to know the
No,
answer.
we don't always know the answer. And look, coming from the background that I've come in human services, like counseling, support work, youth at risk, homeless shelters, DV, all of that for a really long time, there's still a part of me, well, there's a huge part of me that's very, very compassionate. And my learning has been about the fact that that's one of my superpowers, to be so empathetic and to have a good heart, but there needs to be boundaries. And that has to kind of stop when you have a professional relationship with somebody and they're dropping the ball. As much as you can understand where they're coming from and feel empathy, if that's leaching into your business and having a flow on effect, there needs to be, um, yeah, a change in direction in that instance.
Yeah, absolutely. Or not even just in your business, in just life in general, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right.
yeah, yeah.
Can't change people.
No,
Um,
we can only change
but
ourselves.
having the
That's all we
wrong,
can.
that's right. And sometimes having the wrong energy in your environment can bring your energy down too. So yeah, if
Yeah,
someone's not open to hearing that, then you just have to kind of like close your circle in a way.
yeah, absolutely. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's empowering yourself, and it's actually surprising how much you empower other people when you step into your own power.
Absolutely. You by saying no, you're one step closer to a yes and the
Yeah,
right yes, not the,
yeah,
this will do for now.
yeah, absolutely. Is there one big moment, whether it be maybe more recently or across your whole sort of life or career, that has just been an absolute game changer for you at all? I know I've kind of dropped this question on you uh, without any notice. Um, but yeah, has there been just an absolute game changer moment for you that you can think of?
The short answer is yes.
Yes.
And that's totally fine. I'm open to cliffhanger questions. Bring it on, sister. That's where the gold comes in.
It is, it is.
The answer to that, it is. The answer to that is multifaceted because I've had a series of them culminating in one big one. And it was all while I worked for other people. There were two companies that I worked for before I started out on my own. One of them was for a really long period of time, and just the dynamic in that company changed gradually. And I realized, again, that I didn't fit and that it was a good thing. Um, and then I was like, right, I'm going to go out on my own, but I still didn't feel that confidence. So I went to work for somebody else. And this time it didn't take that long before I just realized that I was completely out of alignment. And I remember having a conversation with this person. I was working in property investment strategy, which I've done for 14, 15 years now, and working for somebody else. And they asked me to do something that I knew was not the right thing to do, um, and that it would impact my client negatively. And I said, I'm not doing that. That's whatever it was. And the person replied, I'm your boss and I'm telling you to do that. And I responded, I guess you're not my boss anymore.
Wow. I love
And
that.
that
Yeah.
was
I
like,
love that.
and whether it's the universe or God or whatever we feel is our guiding light, or just, that inner sense of self, for whatever reason, I was really not wanting to go out on my own. I really love being part of a team. I really love, working in a group environment. But I was finding that not all groups are created equal. Not all environments are healthy. And there was just obviously this just push, go out on your own, go out on your own. And it wasn't until I finally bit the bullet and I had a month or so just thinking, what am I going to do after that situation? I went, nah, you can do this. You can do this. And off I went and I haven't looked back.
Yeah. I absolutely love that that moment when you just realize I can do it even when you're still scared. It's like
Oh, so
there's just
scared.
no choice. There's just no choice. It's like, you know what? I'm doing it even though I'm scared. And one step, then the next step, then the next step.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, 3 years or 4 years or 5 years down the track, you're still going.
You're still stepping in the right direction. And I
Yeah.
think, it's major. Even when we met at this conference a year ago, and I was a guest speaker or a guest expert, and I remember even seeing the flyers that were coming out or the advertising, and I was listed as a guest expert, and I rang the conference creator facilitator, and I said, "Why are you calling me an expert?" And they said, "How long have you been doing this for?" And I was like, "I don't know, 14 years." And they said, "Do you think that maybe you might know a bit more than the other people in the audience?" I was like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that does make me a bit more knowledgeable." And then I sat on the stage and I looked down in the audience, and there were all these women holding up phones recording me, and I fully panicked. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm going to be all over the internet." And then I was like, it was too late to turn back. And then it's amazing how many thoughts can hop into your head within like a 1 second span of time. And in that moment as well, I was like, that's okay. This is about getting your message out. Because I was talking about how to protect yourself when investing in property, which is a really big passion point of mine. And it's super important. I've come across so many people in my time that needed this guidance before they got into making big life-changing decisions. So I guess that's what spurred me on. I was not up there, selling myself or giving, thinly veiled bits of information, but book a call if you want more. That wasn't it at all. I was giving really good, really compelling information on how to protect yourself, what you needed to know before you get into property investing, all that sort of stuff. So for me, as I looked out of that room and I saw all these people filming, I thought, it's okay, there's more people here, I'm going to help. And then I breathed and then I just got on with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was only a year ago and I was still like really shy of being seen. And it was petrifying, to be honest.
Yet so brave. And you knew you had a message and you knew how to get it out there because you knew it would help people. It
Totally.
wasn't
And look,
about
we
you. It
touched,
actually wasn't about you.
no, it wasn't about me. And, to some extent, I've been like the best kept secret for quite some time.
I love that.
Um, Thank you, but it's the cat's out of the bag now. But we spoke briefly before we started recording about um, return on investment and value, and there have been sort of situations where somebody hasn't seen the value and they've gone off and made their own decisions, and it's been catastrophic financially for them because they haven't known what to look for. They've just known they might want to save themselves some money, but what it's cost them has been exponentially larger than what the fee would have been originally. So, I know it's super important what I talk about, and I know that, it's only through over a decade. Actually, it's almost 18 years in real estate that I've been now. So I started as a sales agent almost 18 years ago. I did 3 years and then yeah, couldn't wasn't for me. I wanted
Yeah.
to actually make a difference. I'd gone from making a massive difference in a lot of people's lives in the human services field. And then, I thought real estate was going to be more about that too. So being able to work with investors actually was able to help fuel my fire for helping people. So, that's why I transitioned into helping investors rather than just being a sales agent. And it meant that I could work Australia wide, not just where I lived, that sort of thing too. But yeah, it's been a serious, serious journey, but it has also always been about the underlying goal is to help, and we started talking about validation and people pleasing. And I just want to tell you that the best kind of validation and how you feel the best about having pleased people is when you're aligning with your ethics and your morals and you're still able to do that for people. And that's a really amazing sense of self.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's you can look for so much external validation and people will give it to you. They'll also give you all the criticism as well. So that's always going to be out there. But it's also about looking like within what you've just said and said, am I being true to myself?
Yeah.
If I am, and I can put my hand on my heart to say, I've done everything that I feel I need to do. If someone else thinks that you should have done X, Y, or Z, you can take that on board as feedback, absolutely.
Of course.
However, if you feel like you've done everything, it's okay. It's okay to just let it be as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And look,
Yeah.
sometimes, um, you know, in both my industries, business development and in property investment strategy, I can't be a yes person.
Mm,
It's a big deal. If I just say yes to you because you've found some property and you think it's amazing and you've got your heart set on it, and I look at it and think that thing is a money trap, but you're in love with it, it is the wrong thing for me to say, yes, go ahead.
yeah.
Sometimes I have to have that hard conversation and say, sorry, Kylie, that's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely. And you might not want to hear it.
No.
However, it's actually okay for you to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
necessary for me to say it. I have to be
Yeah.
true to myself and true to the pillars that I've created these businesses on, which is like client service. Like I'm in the service industry.
Yeah.
A lot of people they think we're in sales. It's service. There
Mm.
is a sales component because there's a purchase at some point, but it is service and it's about, helping people. Ironically, it's about helping people to build amazing foundations and then also build amazing foundations.
Yeah. And ultimately it's about them having and building an amazing foundation so they can have an amazing life.
It is 100% that. You're right.
Yeah, yeah.
Agree.
Now, listening to your story today, you started as, a young kid over in WA that didn't feel like you fitted in. You had all these rules, and then you transitioned into school and workplaces where you still felt like that. And then you got to the point of, there was a few different instances, and you were like, you know what? I actually don't need to fit in anymore. I actually can go out on my own. And here you are today, this amazing, incredible business owner, just absolutely, nailing it out in the business world. Tell us, for our listeners out there, if there's one thing that they could do to maybe take that brave step, what would it be based on all the experience that you've had over your journey?
Oh, just one. Okay.
Or
So,
there could be a couple, but we want to keep it to
no.
manageable ideas for our listeners.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We don't need to like put out our own book on this.
Yes,
I think,
yes.
yet. Stay tuned,
Yes,
people.
that's right.
I see a collaboration in our future. Uh, I I do truly think it's what we've both spoken about in our conversation today, and that is about making sure that first of all, you need to make sure your own moral compass is right. Spend a lot of time making sure that you are listening to that little voice about, like your intuition and your morals and um, we know when we're doing the right and wrong thing. So make sure that you are right with the world first. And once you've done that and you've got that grounded sense of self, then you don't need to be flitting backwards and forwards getting validation from external sources. Once you're comfortable within your own skin, and I read something funny the other day, I'm finally comfortable in my own skin, except now it's all wrinkly and it doesn't fit.
And that's
But
okay.
and that's okay. It can take a while for us to feel right within ourselves, but that's unshakable when we really do feel that. And then, when the time comes, it's more like little waves on the beach rather than huge storms. Maybe something will come in and it'll wash at your feet and your feet will get wet and you'll go, "Oh, okay, right. I noticed that." But you're not being smashed into the rocks. You're not having huge king waves coming in and knocking you off your feet because you've stabilized and you know that you are not for everybody, is not for you. So I think, before you start, and I'm using the general you here, but, in terms of advice, before we start trying to change for everybody around us, just make sure that we're set and solid within ourselves. That's really, really powerful because at the end of the day, if we're right within ourselves, then the rest of the world can kind of wash off in a way. But if we don't have stability within ourselves, we get buffeted around and knocked around by the opinions and the weight of the world.
Yeah, I love that. There was a couple of messages in there. First of all, you don't have to be for everybody and everyone doesn't have to be for you. I think that's really key. And your second one is be you, because that is your superpower essentially. That's that's
Yep.
what I'm hearing from you.
Oh, you've heard absolutely correctly, and it's funny, there was one of the things that was said in the first company as they started to change their focus from customer satisfaction to managerial satisfaction. One of the comments that would get sort of thrown about was Mia doesn't play well with others. And at the time, I was highly offended. I thought, oh my goodness, what do you mean? Definitely a team player. And then I worked out that I absolutely do play well with others, just not idiots.
Yep. And hence,
Yeah.
not everyone's going to be for you, and you're not going to be for everybody.
Well, what's that saying? Why would you try and fit in when you're born to stand out?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on, Mia. How can
Oh, thank you for
people
having me, my friend.
how can people find more out about you, whether they want to, learn a little bit more about you and your business or just talk about life in general?
Oh, and I do love a good chinwag about life in general. And you and I will continue this.
We will, we
Um,
will.
but we will indeed. If anyone wants to find me, I'm on LinkedIn, Mia Shilkin, Shilkin. And my website is miacasastrategy.com.au. I've also founded D32 Business Network on the Sunshine Coast, which is a networking community for business growth and development for business owners. D32 Sunshine Coast. You can Google that and find me there. Of course, there's Instagram, there's Facebook. I'm all over those, but they're probably the best way of finding me. And I'm always up for a chat about business development or property or both.
Oh, fantastic. And I'll put all of those links in the notes in the podcast, so you can click on those and go and connect with Mia. So thank you again so much. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners before we finish up on the podcast today?
Not about myself, but I just wanted to say thank you to you because it's beautiful that you've got this podcast to find the magic within your guests. And I just want to acknowledge how much magic there is in you and what you do for the world. And, even in the short time that we've known each other, I've just seen exponentially how much light you shine on everyone around you. And I just wanted to take a moment to say, thank you for that. And it's a real honor to be here today and to be picked as somebody that you consider worthwhile to be on your podcast, and just keep up the awesome work also.
Oh, thank you, Mia. It's this is a real passion of mine. I love having conversations with incredible people so we can inspire more in the world to find their magic. And, my whole mission is I believe everyone has magic inside of them. Sometimes you just need a little nudge or a little reminder to go and find it, or even to take that brave step. Sometimes you just need someone to hold your hand to do it. So thank you so much for those beautiful comments. And to our listeners today, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Remember, the magic is inside of you. You are the magic. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye for now.